All right, they're a shy bunch, but look, we're going to make you guys come out of your shells a little bit and get interactive. We've tried to make this presentation as interactive as possible. We'll certainly ask you guys a few questions along the way. So if you could use either the chat function or the Q&A boxes, whichever you're most comfortable with. The chat function is obviously public and the Q&A is private. It'll be just sent to myself and Martin, but it'll hopefully make the presentation a little bit more interactive. So let's kick off. So welcome everybody to our presentation on internships. Martin and I will be handling today's presentation. The things that we want to cover with you guys are resumes, cover letters, which I need to point out is not a mandatory requirement for our program, but me personally, I do like to see a cover letter. I think it does strengthen a student's candidacy. So I'm going to talk about that briefly. And then Martin is going to talk to you about something called the internship interest form, or the IIF as we call it internally. So I'm not sure what you guys know about our program. If you've already expressed any interest in our internships, you might know what the IIF is. If not, then Martin will talk about that briefly with you guys. So just a little bit about us. Martin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So hi everyone, warm welcomes from Czech Republic, Prague, in Central Europe. So my name is Martin Brokeš. I've been with CEA for about 3 years. I'm the internship coordinator here. What else to say? I'm passionate about traveling, studied abroad in the UK, did internship in Taiwan. That's why I'm kind of doing this job, because it was impactful for me. So I kind of hope to perhaps convince you that this program is worthwhile throughout this presentation. Colin, the floor is yours.
Hello, I am Colin Hogan. I'm the internship coordinator here at CEA Dublin. I'm sure you can tell by my accent, I am not from these parts originally. I am a Chicago native in the United States. And yeah, I fell in love with international education and global travel. So I did my undergrad in the States, and then I did some backpacking shortly after that, and just fell in love with life in Europe. So I came over here and did a master's in marketing a long time ago at this stage, and I ended up staying. I just managed to stumble into the field of study abroad, and I've been here ever since. So I don't know if you guys have already done any abroad programs, but certainly once you dip your foot into the water, it can get a hold of you, and it's tough to get out. So just be prepared. If you do embark on that kind of adventure, it'll certainly open your eyes and become, life-changing. So that's a bit about us, and we'll get going with the presentation. Before we do anything, Martin has a few icebreaker questions, and we need you guys to participate. So we're going to call you out and put you on the spot.
Yes. So, well, let me try. The first question, if we can go to the next slide, Colin, perhaps. So we would like to get a sense of the room, just to understand who we are talking to, so we can adjust the content accordingly. How confident are you in the quality of your resume? From 1 to 10, if you can put your answer into the chat function, 1 being like not very confident, and 10 being very confident about the quality of your resume. If you can, I'm just gonna monitor the chat to see if we have any answers. Okay. Well, perhaps I guess we can.
Okay, we're going to move on. All right, we're going to move on. Yeah. Okay. The other one was we were just going to find out whether you guys have ever attended a resume building workshop, possibly at your home university or elsewhere. If you've done any, stuff online as well. There are so many resources available now. So we're just going to put it to you guys to figure out what where you are, I suppose, in your building your professional profile. So enough with the icebreakers, though. We'll get started. Just here, a quick introduction. You might be a little bit confused by the word there on the piece of paper and the image, because we have resumes at the top and curriculum vitae there in the image. It's something to get used to, if you do enroll in the program, that get used to hearing us call them CVs a lot. We're a little bit different here in Europe. We like to, speak like we're fancy people and speak Latin. So we call it a CV. In the United States, it's, you know, universally used or called a resume. Here in Europe, it's called the CV. So another question here, but I don't think we're going to be getting any interactivity. I was going to ask you if you knew what this figure meant. And really what it means is, on average, an employer or prospective employer is only going to spend about 6 seconds looking at your resume, which is not a lot of time. So you really need to make sure that your, you know, piece of paper that you're putting forward is packing a punch, and that everything is on point, the content, the style, the look, all of that, to make sure that somehow in those 6 seconds, they're going to put you into the yes or the maybe pile as opposed to the no pile. So that's what that figure means. So you really do, you know, pressure is on. You don't have a lot of time to go in and make that impression. Let me just close some of these here. There we go. So resume writing, just a couple quick things to mention. The one size fits all approach doesn't always work. As students, I know this might sound a little bit, you know, overwhelming, where you think to yourself, how am I supposed to have multiple versions of my CV or resume? Well, if you're, you know, say, take international business, for example, if you were looking for jobs in that field, it's quite broad. And there's really, you know, there's not really, I suppose, organizations that are like, I am a 100% international business company. So if you're looking for jobs in that broad area, you probably want to have at least 2 or 3 versions of your resume. So if you're going for something that might be an international sales job versus maybe an international finance job, you want to make sure that it's going to be as relevant and tailored as possible for that role. Do your research and match your skills and experience with the position and company. I realize that some of you guys, you know, when you apply to CEA's internship program, you have no idea the types of companies and roles that we might be able to provide for you. But here you can simply look at potential job descriptions in your sector, and you can also look at maybe what we would be looking for in a candidate for a student coming here to do an international internship. And you really want to try to match it to what CEA would be looking for, as well as the prospective company. So resume writing, some things to consider: the length. I was going to ask a question here, but I don't think I'll get an answer to see how long it should be for students who are still, you know, in the process of completing their studies. Really, 1 page should do it all. Okay, even if you have loads of experience, there are a couple of sectors where students feel, well, no, it's really necessary for me to spill onto 2 pages. But once again, at your age, and given the fact that you only have 6 seconds to make an impression, you should really try to do everything you can to fit it onto just 1 page. We'll talk a little bit about structure, style and format, content, and spelling and grammar. You're all native English speakers, but which is even more critical, that if you're making little small sloppy mistakes on your paperwork, you're going to instantly go into that no pile. So sections, I was going to see ask you guys what are the most relevant or necessary sections. Someone's chatting to me here. Okay, gotcha. So the heading is going to be quite important. We'll talk about that in a little bit. An objective and summary statement. This is optional for students. I always tell them it's a good way to fill space on the page. If you don't have much experience and you're looking at it saying it literally looks like a blank piece of paper, well, then you can use this section to, I suppose, add a bit of content. Education, that's going to be really, really strong and important because you guys don't have much professional experience under your belts yet. So this section really needs to sing, and Martin's going to talk about that in a minute. Experience, hopefully you have a little bit of experience under your belts, and we'll talk about that shortly as well in terms of the most essential pieces of information that need to be there. Additional skills and information. If you have language skills, if you have volunteer experience, this is a good way to kind of have, I suppose, an umbrella section where you can put a few bits and pieces in there. Awards and certifications, if you have any of those. Activities and interests, ? In the United States, most, I think, employers would say not important. We're not really that interested. Where for me personally, in Europe, when I come across resumes or CVs, a lot of them do have a section here, and it's an opportunity just to give the reader a little bit more personal information in terms of things you like to do outside of work. Martin, did you want to add something there on that?
Yes, very very quickly, let me chip in. So I have a corporate background. I worked in two major corporations, and from my experience, this section or this part activities and interests, it depends into what kind of field you or industry you are applying in. So in the corporate sector, even though they kind of want to see activities and interests, I think personally that it's more about like it still should be something that makes you stand out, if it makes sense. So for instance, like you were swimming, but not just swimming, but maybe swimming competitively, or like you did long distance swimming, which kind of shows that you have the stamina and the competitiveness, and even that kind of makes you stand out. So yeah, just my 2 cents basically, that maybe it also depends on the industry you are applying.
Yeah. Thank you, Martin. And look, some of these things can be a little bit subjective. I'm coming at it from a marketing background. And as Martin said, he's coming at it from a more technical, analytical background. So some of these things, depending on the sector and the field, might be more relevant. And then the last thing, references. In Europe, people often put these on their CV, or they say references upon request. My attitude towards it is that, employers are gonna look and check things out and make sure that the information that you're putting down is, valid. So there's really no need to put this down. When it gets to that stage in the process, the employer or the company will ask for that information. So there's a little image there of just, in my opinion, a really strong layout for a resume. It has all the relevant sections there. And then just briefly talking about traditional versus creative. Obviously, there are some fields like accounting where style doesn't really matter very much. And then there are other fields like graphic design where, style matters a lot. Okay, so there's two very drastically different resume styles there. In my opinion, I would probably go for something in the middle like that one there. It's got all of the necessary information. There's a lot of, textual content, but there's also a nice heading at the top with a personal brand there that, Catherine Martinez must have created, or maybe, used a special site or software to create that. Martin, did you want to add anything there? Are you okay?
No, I think I'm fine.
Okay. So again, me as the marketer, I would say with your heading, try to make it pop a little bit. Okay. With that 6-second rule, this is, a way to draw the reader's eye and say, oh, this looks a little bit different to, the paperwork that I'm looking at all the time, the same exact style, the same exact template. So this is your chance to be a little bit creative and adventurous without going over the top. I wouldn't go too crazy with colors. I wouldn't go too crazy with font styles, but it is a good chance, a good opportunity to just make it look a little bit, uniquely different to the rest of the competition. So personal details, again, things to include. We're not going to be able to put this to the audience, but some of this stuff is probably self-explanatory, but just a couple of key things to mention here. You definitely want to make sure you're using a professional email address. That can be a Gmail account, your personal Gmail account, or if you want to use your school email address. But obviously we don't want to see something like, kittens123@gmail.com or something like that. And then I'm sure most students have LinkedIn pages at this stage, and it is important. A lot of times students want to put that in their heading onto their CV, and when it's this really long truncated URL, it looks quite messy and sloppy. So it's very quick and easy to fix that. Just go in there and customize your URL to make it something a little bit shorter and nicer to look at on the page. Martin, did you want to talk about personal websites?
Yeah, maybe just quickly, I just kind of noticed that trend, I guess fairly recently, and especially if you're in a creative industry, like marketing, filmmaking, or photography, I think you really want to have your personal website where you can actually put your portfolio. Some of the employers, they ask to kind of see it, and if you want to stand out, I would very much recommend that, again, especially for the creative industries.
Excellent, thanks, Martin. And then lastly, don't include any of these things here. Why? Because they could be used for discriminatory purposes. So things like your age, the reader's going to be able to put 2 and 2 together, looking at, your years of study and things like that, and the rest of the stuff, don't use it. In the United States, this is it's known more universally across the rest of the world, and certainly in Europe, sometimes they do include things like photos and nationalities and things like that. So objectives, as I said, this is a nice way to customize your resume. If you need to fill space, but really, if you're trying to tailor your CV, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, the one size fits all approach doesn't always work. Then you can try to use this section here to say, all right, I'm specifically applying for this role in this position, and to make it look like, you put in extra effort to write it for that particular company. So there's an example at the top there of a bad objective. It's way too general, way too vague and broad. It doesn't really say anything. There's no real substance there. And then at the bottom there, it gives a little bit more info in terms of the student's background, what type of role they're looking for, and then also at the end there, you can insert the company's name and personalize it for the company. So Martin.
Yes. So education and qualifications. As Colin mentioned before, because most of you probably won't have that much experience at this point, this section where we would recommend you really pay attention to, and you make sure there's kind of the important piece of information there. So like for instance, if you can go to the so make sure to include the years of study. I would recommend to include only your university studies. You could include your high school, but it's not necessary, and honestly, it's probably not really needed. So list relevant coursework, of course, mention academic achievements, and highlight relevant projects. I would like to show you actually an example, if you can. I find this pretty strong example. So if you have a good GPA, whatever is, I guess, above 3, makes sense to put it there. It makes you stand out. And as I said, there's the relevant coursework, awards and honors. That's always a good idea to include. I personally like that the clubs and organization section. Technically, you could also include it at the bottom of the resume in the extracurricular activity section, but it could be here. And what I really like is the marketing, or in this case, it's marketing projects, but basically, especially again, if you haven't really done anything in the office before, you kind of want to write about whatever projects you did within your studies. So this might be a good example. It could be actually in the education section. It wouldn't have to be 2 different sections like it's on this example, but I think this particular example is quite strong. So yeah, that's the education section.
Thank you, Martin. Moving on to the experience section, or the work experience section, you should start with the most recent experience, and it should go in descending order from there. And 4 pieces of information need to be immediately clear, and those are company name, the role or the position or title, the dates of your employment, and the location. Okay, so you can play around with the formatting. There are certain templates that make it quite easy to make this information stand out, but really, after maybe your heading maybe stands out a little bit at first glance, the thing that they're going to look at next is, your education section and your experience section. And this information needs to be crystal clear. And then ideally you should have, a minimum of 3 bullet points per position that outlines the role, responsibilities, and achievements or accomplishments. I'm not opposed to a student only having 2 bullet points, but I think if you have one position where there were only 2 bullet points, then the other roles you should try to have, 3 or 4 or whatever, because really you need to be trying to, sell your past experience and show that you have transferable skills, and that you're going to be a valuable asset to prospective companies. So, and then lastly, use strong action verbs. I'm sure many of you have, used different resources. There's so much available online these days. This is just something that I pulled from online, and there's plenty of different examples similar to this, but basically gives you a list of all the different action verbs that you can use on your resume. And depending on the role, depending on, the type of skill that you were utilizing, you can just go down this list and pick and choose. And ideally, you shouldn't be using the same word over and over. Coordinated. Try to vary it. Use, look for synonyms so that you're not repeating the same word over and over on the resume. There's just an example there of both action verbs as well as quantitative achievements or accomplishments. So there you can see anytime you can put that down into your bullet points showing that you were managing a team of 8 employees, you were managing a budget of X, coordinating 20 events, working with 17,000 people. That's going to show some impressive information, and you really want to make that sing on your paperwork. And then I just simply wanted to say that once I said it a minute ago, there's so much out there. So you do have career centers, and I'm sure they're amazing at their jobs, and I'm sure they've been extremely helpful. But if you're ever having to do this yourself on your own at home, there's just a plethora of resources out there. So this one here, Resume Genius, will help you. And no matter what your role was, if you were working as a cashier, if you were working as a server at a restaurant, you might say, well, look, the role was pretty simple. I don't really need to explain what I did there. That's absolutely wrong. Okay. And there's tools out there like Resume Genius where they're, give you, samples that you can look at to make sure that the bullet points are just, as impressive as possible and making your role and experience sound important, because it is. No matter what job you're doing, you're contributing to an organization. So you need to make sure that you're communicating that to the reader. Martin?
Yes, as Colin mentioned, there is so much out there. This is a resource that I personally like. I mean, there are some free templates. So in case you don't have a resume at this point, or you feel like your resume is not adequate, perhaps, maybe as a result of this presentation, this is a website you can go to and check out different templates, and maybe choose one that kind of suits your needs and the industry, as we already discussed. Yeah.
Thank you, Martin. I'm conscious of time. Do you want me to do this, Martin? Or
I can just quickly cover that. Again, we're not gonna get interactivity here, but we are about to basically ask if you know the STAR technique, because that's a technique that is used not just in resume building, but mostly in interviews. So it stands for situation, task, action, and result. Maybe Colin, you can just click on all of them. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe I'm just gonna highlight that. I think it's maybe like if you imagine you writing this sort of resume part, and maybe you were a marketing or let's say social media manager, you can think about the task you got. Maybe it was to increase following for the Instagram of the company. What sort of action did you take? Like maybe you did some research, right? Maybe you talked to a colleague, whatever you did. And then most importantly, perhaps, and I think that's always key, that's the result. So everybody, all HR people and all marketing managers will care about the result. So how much did you increase the following in the end? And you can be, that's a section where you can be very measurable and you can quantify that, as Colin mentioned before. Because that's quite important to do in the resume. So I think we can leave it like this, and I'm sure most of the people probably already know it. So.
Okay. So just to conclude on resumes, some top tips before we move on. Use a contemporary, professional, and easily readable template and font. And as Martin said, there are tools out there to give you some really nice, slick templates. Highlight your best stuff first. You are all students, so that should be the stuff you're trying to highlight first. And as once you graduate and you start gaining professional experience, all of a sudden you'll see those sections inverting. And then your experience section will be at the top and your education section will move to the bottom because it's less relevant, less important. Be as specific as possible. Accomplishments are always going to be more impressive than just general duties. So for example, managing a budget of $1.5 million is going to be pretty impressive. Vary your verbs. Using that list that we looked at, keep it simple, okay? Just, don't try to overcomplicate it. You only have one page to get in there and try to present, some really important information. So don't overdo it. Limit to one page and make every word count. Remove irrelevant info. And lastly, this might sound like, hang on, I thought I'm supposed to try to oversell myself and make it sound important. You are to some extent, but you can tell if somebody's going over the top and doing it too much, and they're, you can almost put somebody off, maybe saying, well, this person might be a little bit difficult to work with or whatever. So you really want to make everything sound important and special, but just, you never want to be doing it to the extreme. Proofread to make sure that there are no spelling mistakes. And then lastly, PDF, because as you know, sometimes you send something and then the formatting goes off because it was sent as a Word doc as opposed to a PDF. So that's it for resume writing. I'm going to fly through cover letters because it's not a mandatory part of the program, and I'm conscious of the time as well, and I want to give Martin sufficient time to talk about the internship interest form. So it's pretty similar, okay, to the resume. However, you just need to make sure that you're making it, differentiating it from your resume as much as possible in terms of the content. The last thing you want to do is just have a 100% overlap of information. The only other thing I mentioned here is, talking about the heading and making it pop. You can do that on your cover letter as well. And then from a marketing point of view, you're branding your paperwork and it's going to stand out and it's going to look really slick and clean. And the reader, might have a more positive or favorable opinion of it. So that's it. Spelling and grammar, again, essential. So in my opinion, now there's, this is subjective as well. Some people might say it should only be 3 paragraphs, and that main body paragraph can be quite substantial. I would always break it up into 4 paragraphs, particularly for students with limited experience. So you have obviously your opening paragraph and your closing statement. Those are pretty self-explanatory. As far as the main body, I would break that up into the second paragraph being about your hard skills. If there's anything for opportunities or roles in digital marketing or in sales, if you have those skills, then you talk about them, okay? And then in that third paragraph, or the second main body paragraph, you can talk about your softer side a little bit more, and you can talk about your personality traits and what makes you a unique fit for the company, the role, its values, etc. So again, resumes aren't very personal, they're very objective, whereas your cover letter does give you an opportunity to tell a little bit more about who you are as a person. So I would always say, go for that, show that side. There's just a visual example there. Okay, again, 4 solid paragraphs, intro, main body, 2 main body paragraphs, and then a conclusion, closing statement. So in terms of the top tips, don't regurgitate information too much. There might be a little bit of overlap, but maybe you can go into more detail about a specific bullet point on your resume. Keep it short and sweet. Focus on what you have to offer, not what you want to gain. For me, this is really important. I find this happens all the time. When students write a cover letter, it's all about me, 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 me. And that's understandable, but what you need to realize is the employer is also thinking me, 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 me. And they want to know what you have to offer them and how you're going to contribute to the company and make them more successful. So you really need to kind of flip that mindset and say, this isn't about me, this is about what I have to give to this company or this organization. Use the job description as a roadmap. Okay, look at the bullet points in terms of the the requirements for the role, and then whatever boxes you tick, you take those and you talk about them in your cover letter. Provide good examples, find the right tone, like I said, balance the personal with the professional, and finish with a clear, strong and clear call to action. Sorry, and then lastly, PDF. So that is it. I'm going to hand over to Martin now, who is our expert on the internship interest form. I might jump in from time to time, but I realize that I've dominated the presentation so far. So Martin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Colin. Well said, well said. Well, let me spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes on this. So internship interest form is part of the application process at CEA. You have to submit the resume, obviously, and this internship interest form, which in the end helps us to find you the best possible internship for you. It's kind of like a starting point, let's say, of the discussion before the interviews that you have actually one with the specialist in the US, and then the second one if you apply for the program with us in different European locations. So let's go to the next slide. We basically picked 3 questions that we feel like are important. There are probably about like 25 questions on that form, even though some of them are pretty short and easy to answer, but these 3 we found important. So one is motivation. And by the way, motivation is overall, I would say, key in this whole process, because even when you, in the end, would have an interview with an employer, because you might not have that much experience, motivation is key. in the process. You have to look like you really want to do this for the employer to want to work with you. But here in the interest form, you can see on the top of the slide the question. I included one example underneath that I feel is solid and is quite good. And just generally speaking, what I would recommend is be you, be authentic, show us who you are, that you really want to be with us in whatever location you pick in the end. Be original. I don't know how many times I've heard that a student wants to go to Prague because it's a fairy tale city or city of thousand towers. So, you know, we hear these things quite often. I mean, we've been doing this for some time. So we keep this in mind and try to make it you. So that's the motivation. The next one is professional fields of interest. As part of the process, we ask you to think about the 3 different fields that you are interested in terms of the internship placement. So again, you can see the question on top. I included one resource, ONET, which we recommend. You can go there if you are kind of clueless in terms of what you want to actually do after you graduate, or you know, what sort of internship you would like to do, which, by the way, is quite common. And I think I was kind of the same when I was at the university. I wasn't sure what to do. So that's kind of why we also exist, why we do this program. But to have a better or more meaningful conversation with us when we have the interview in the location, please go to that website, or even if you go to some job boards or different professional associations on LinkedIn, there are some good resources in terms of what career paths actually exist within a certain industry or field. In this example, let's say a student would choose as a first choice marketing or branding, second public relations, and human resources as a third choice. So maybe you could have some sort of idea before the interview, what positions are there, and try to be realistic as well, because, for instance, if you don't really have any experience at all, probably you won't be leading a team of people, right, in the internship. So having some sort of realistic expectation about that. And I would also recommend to be open and flexible. Sometimes what we see that students who are really set on whatever they want to do, marketing, or they want to do finance, after the discussion with us during the interview, maybe we talk about some other options, and the student might realize that's actually a better fit than what they thought previously. So even though I guess in most cases, if you are a marketing major, you want to have a marketing placement, which makes sense. But just keep in mind there might be some other interesting options that are maybe not that visible at the first place. Yeah. And the last one, internship learning objectives. So again, you can kind of read the question on top. I'm not sure if you've heard about the framework called SMART. We already talked about STAR technique. So this is a SMART technique. It's a technique how to sort of establish meaningful learning objectives. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. And that's how we kind of ask our applicants to think about these goals. At CA, we recognize 3 different objectives. You can see the example, professional, cultural, and personal. Again, I feel this example is quite solid. There are some numbers in it, so it's quite measurable. And we kind of recommend to think in terms of minimums. So like this student would say that he wants to identify 3 differences in business operations between US and Czech Republic. So perhaps like minimum, at minimum 3 differences, but of course you could recognize or kind of identify more than that. But that's a solid start. I think, unless you, Colin, have anything that you would like to add from your perspective about either of these slides I covered, I think I'm kind of okay with my part here.
I mean, and look, I mean, we will work with you on the objectives. When you fill out the interest form, you establish them on your own, and then you'll go through a series of interviews or calls with CEA staff, and we kind of tweak these and tease them out and make them a bit more smart. So we'll be there to help, but it's obviously a good starting point to put a little bit of, thought into this in terms of what you want to achieve. And then going back to the first one about the motivation, I would agree with Martin. It's great just to see students take the time to, really craft a really clear, concise message in terms of why they're participating in the program and what they want to get out of it. And then, it's just quite moving sometimes to find out their motivation. So this is really helpful to us as internship coordinators. So, it is quite long. Obviously, how many questions is it, Martin?
I think like 27, but some of these
Okay.
are just like a check boxes.
Yeah.
So it's not always like you would have to, actually answer in sentences.
Yeah, so I mean, some will take more time than others, but 27 questions. But these are the three that we feel are most important, and they're going to make our jobs easier, trying to find you an appropriate placement, and getting to know you guys as well in terms of who you are, where you're coming from, and what you want to get out of it. So, any questions? I don't think we have anybody out there to ask questions, so we'll skip through this and finish with our conclusion slide. You're all hired. You got the job. We found perfect, dream internships for you in Prague and Dublin, depending on where you go, so where you want to go. So anyway, we hope you enjoyed that, and we hope to maybe see you on a CEA internship program at some point in the future. Thank you very much.
All right, bye everyone.
Take care.